Right. Very good.
Okay. So for everyone's awareness, this is another of the OSV coming in and giving expert input, which has been really great. So we had, I think it was Rich and maybe Mike, I'm forgetting their names, but on the sales team come earlier. We might be having Matt Smith come in a little bit, talk about development. So we'll have another topic or two, but these are the OSV experts. And Scott, one of those, he's a publisher at our Sunday Visitor. Before OSV, Scott worked for 23 years at Rockford Institute, holding various different roles as editor and director. And he's been a Catholicism expert on about.com for 10 years and was board of directors for Rockford Area Pregnancy Care Center. Scott went to Michigan State for his bachelor's degree in political theory and went on to pursue his master's at CUA. So Scott, a little bit more about you, anything that I might have missed, any helpful background or context about what you're doing at OSV to start us off?
Well, so when I came on at OSV about 3 years ago, I came on in a kind of a weird startup position, something that we were trying out called Senior Content Network Manager, and it was an idea of trying to reuse content, the print content that we have, 108 years worth of print content, reuse it in digital formats and that sort of thing, that kind of didn't quite pan out, but in the process we did realize that OSV was in need of some of what a publisher would do. So we've gone back to the publisher position. So as such, I'm overseeing our publishing operations, trade books, parish products, all of our periodicals, pamphlets, all of that sort of thing. And now recently with our alliance with Alatea, overseeing that fairly large web presence that Alatea in English and Spanish provides. So it's really kind of an exciting time for us here at OSV as we look at especially in the midst of this pandemic, as things are being shaken up. Print products have struggled a little bit, but we have a great opportunity to take advantage of the kind of technology we're using right here to reach out to a much broader audience, and through that to prepare ourselves for the opportunity down the road here when let's pray things get back to something closer to normal, and we can use that broader audience to bring people the kinds of products that OSV's been known for the last 108 years. So
perfect. Imprimatur. I'm
You're breaking.
All right, here, I'm gonna go off camera. Sometimes that helps. Okay, so Scott, we had some questions earlier about when and why to get the imprimatur and any other types of official ecclesial endorsement. So maybe you could just talk to us about different types, when they're appropriate, and then how to get them.
Right. So the first thing to know about both the Nihil Obstat and the Imprimatur are that not surprisingly, the church is sort of still caught up in the print world when it comes to these matters. Canon law, in fact, speaks of this really entirely in terms of print. The imprimatur literally means, let it be printed. So that's the first thing to know when we're talking about Nihil and imprimatur, is that much of what is being done by Catholic apostolates today, Catholic organizations today, Catholic both nonprofits, for-profit companies, really lies outside of the technical need for a nihil or an imprimatur. That said, let's talk about what each of these are. A nihil obstat is a certification that that a competent ecclesiastical authority has examined the material that has received the nihil obstat, examined it, and found nothing within it that is contrary to the faith. Okay. So that doesn't necessarily mean that that everything in, say, a book that has received a nihil obstat is necessarily something that the censor librorum, that's the usual Catholic official for the diocese who reviews the material and provides the nihil obstat. It doesn't necessarily mean that the censor librorum would say agree with every idea expressed in the book. But what they are saying is that when it comes to anything that touches on matters of doctrine or dogma, there's nothing in here that's contrary to the faith. That when it comes to matters of opinion, there's nothing here that's necessarily contrary to the faith, but there may be differences of opinion on what's the best way forward, what's prudential, for instance. But that certification does not necessarily mean that every Catholic would say, pick up this book and say, oh, I agree with everything in it. There's certainly room for disagreement and discussion within the faith itself on matters that aren't matters of doctrine or dogma. So the normal process for receiving a nihil obstat is to take the final manuscript and to a little bit of feedback there. Take the final manuscript and to send it off to the competent authority in your diocese. And again, in most cases, most dioceses have a censor librorum. It's not required that the diocese have that particular office. They can designate someone else. And in some cases, even the bishop will look over such materials. But you send it off to the diocese, and they will tell you basically how long it's going to take to look this material over. When the material has been looked over, the censor librorum will come back and say, hey, I would request these changes, or if you're lucky, no changes are necessary. But often there's some minor little thing, just a change in wording, something to try to clarify a matter that does touch on doctrine or dogma. For some types of publications, you could actually just stop there. And the point of the nihil is just to say, okay, this is a product that is safe. But in most cases, you're receiving the nihil obstat in order to go on and get the imprimatur. And the imprimatur is something a bit stronger. That is essentially a bishop's endorsement of this particular text. Now, that can vary from diocese to diocese. Some bishops take that very seriously, and so even though there may be nothing contrary to the faith in a particular text, if a bishop, say, does disagree with something that's more of a matter of opinion, he might decline to give an imprimatur. That doesn't mean that the book wouldn't necessarily be able to be printed and to be marketed as a Catholic book. It just means that he's not going to put his stamp of approval on that. In general, though, most bishops follow the recommendation of their censor librorum. So if the censor librorum provides the nihil obstat and says, look, this book is fine from a doctrinal standpoint or a dogmatic standpoint, then the bishop will go ahead and provide the imprimatur. So why would you want to get, well, actually, let's start with this. Why would you need to get either a nihil or an imprimatur or both? There are certain circumstances outlined in canon law where it's necessary to get this material. So for certain Catholic academics teaching in Catholic schools, the material that they publish needs to be reviewed and needs to receive a nihil and an imprimatur. For certain Catholic schools and certain types of products used in Catholic schools, the material that's used needs to have a nihil and an imprimatur. So, for instance, we have a book called Timeless by Steve Weidenkopf, and it's a book on the history of the Catholic Church over the last 2,000 years. A great book. It's being used in many Catholic high schools, and many of these Catholic high schools are, because they are diocesan schools, they require material of this sort to have an imprimatur. So a book of history normally would not require that you seek an imprimatur on it. But if you want that history book to be used as a textbook in a Catholic school, then and the history book is about the church, then it needs an imprimatur. The other major situation is any Catholic church or a shrine that's been erected by ecclesiastical authority, or any organization that has an actual basically that owes its existence to the church. If they wish to sell materials that are designated as Catholic, those materials should have an imprimatur to indicate that they have been reviewed and that they are regarded as worthwhile for the faithful to read. So, and I realize after saying all of that I never really addressed the question of why the church focuses so strongly on making sure that printed materials are in fact edifying. And that goes back to, obviously, the expansion of of printed materials in the 17th, 18th, 19th centuries, and the fact that such printed materials were more widely available. The church has always encouraged Catholics to read, to support the Catholic press, but has also made it clear that the bishop, as the shepherd of souls in his diocese, needs to be needs to be very active in trying to make sure that A, there are good Catholic materials available for his flock to read, and B, that those Catholic materials, or those materials that claim to be Catholic, can reliably be considered Catholic. So let me pause there and see if there are any questions on what I've said so far.
Scott, I think one general question, I haven't seen this in the chat, but I know has been discussed, is a lot of people have podcasts or different types of media. And is there just any precedent for getting a podcast through with this type of content, or any other unusual forms that are non-print? Because I think those are the likeliest scenarios.
Right. And again, so this may change in the future. I'll kind of answer this obliquely by talking about Catholic curriculum, because we're seeing actually a development right now in the United States on how the U.S. bishops deal with curriculum products. Currently, in order to have a curriculum product approved for use in a Catholic school or a Catholic religious ed program, that product has to be a print product. The church says any print product, if you want this product to get the church's stamp of approval, it has to go through something they call the conformity process, which is something a little different from the process we're talking about, but it is it's similar in the sense that the church is saying these curriculum products are safe, they are reliable, they are something that you can use. But this has left open wide open the possibility of providing curriculum products that don't have a print component, and there's no real oversight over those. So it is possible to create an entirely online or audio or an app for curriculum that does not have to go through this same review process. Now, what the USCCB is working on right now is looking at, okay, is there a way that we can actually certify organizations, Catholic organizations, to say, because you have received this certification, the materials that you publish are materials that anybody can trust, whether those materials are print, whether they're video, whether they're online, whether they're an app, etc. And that seems to be the direction that things are headed in. That will actually clear up this process and mean that essentially nobody can say, look, I don't have a print version, so therefore I don't need to go through that same kind of process. My suspicion is that if this actually does work, that there will be more pressure over time to take that same sort of idea and apply it to the Nihil obstat and Imprimatur process. Currently, under canon law, there's no requirement for anything outside of printed materials.
Perfect, Martin. And why don't you do intro, and then Nancy, you just follow up.
Sure. Thank you so much for coming, Scott. My name is Martin, and I'm establishing houses of discernment using former convent buildings. Our organization is called Harbor. So one of the things that makes these ecclesiastical approvals a little bit complex, I would imagine, for things like podcasts, is that podcasts are published with a certain form of regularity. So I suppose that the church would not want to approve a moving target.
Right.
So I was wondering if there was maybe a better analogy for podcasts that might be better than books, because books don't move. Would be something like a magazine. Is there like a form of ecclesiastical approval for magazines? And maybe they're not approving all the content in this specific issue, but maybe they go, you know what, overall these guys seem to be pretty good, or something like that.
Really, the only thing there would be the fact that that certain bishops do endorse certain periodicals, and that is something that, by the way, I can encourage anyone who has a podcast, has a website, has an app, that sort of thing. Go out and seek endorsements from bishops. It's always best if you can get the endorsement from your local bishop as well as others, because that's usually a very good sign that your local bishop is the one most likely to know you. And then feature those endorsements prominently on your website, on your app page, in the endorsements for your podcast. But in that sense, there's nothing where you could say it's the equivalent of a nihil or an imprimatur. It does go back to that sort of situation that I just discussed, that with curriculum, that I do think that given the massive explosion, really, of Catholic apostolates that are focused on the digital world, that over time there's going to be more and more pressure to try to come up with some way of certifying those particular apostolates in a broad sense, to say you can trust the material that comes from them, but they'll never be able to really examine every piece of material that's released digitally.
Perfect. Thanks, Nancy. Feel free to jump in.
Okay. Hi. Can you guys hear me? I'm sorry.
Yes.
I'm at the lake with my kids, and of course someone's throwing a fit right now. Okay. So I have two questions, actually. One is like an immediate question. I want to walk away from the screamer. So we just yesterday released a course for Catholic families. It's all audio, and it's we were hearing from tons of people. We have a daily podcast for Catholic kids, so like the audio space is kind of where we are. And we've had a lot of success with forming families just through a simple podcast. So to fill the space with so many families at home suddenly with faith formation this fall, we released this course. It's based on the Creed. I mean, it's pretty much just going through the first part of the Catechism.
Right.
Anyway, I have been getting tons of questions from parishes that want to use it, asking if we have an imprimatur. We don't, obviously, but I'm just wondering, how do I help educate? Because we get repeated and intensifying requests to use our materials. If there's no real way to get an imprimatur for digital content right now, like, what do I do to educate these people on that?
That's a very good question, and I wish that I had a good answer for you on that. It does raise the question: could an organization like OSV provide something along those lines? Would it, maybe in fact, with this particular situation in mind, we've been writing a lot in our periodicals about the challenges that schools and parents are facing this fall it might be interesting to have a piece on choosing appropriate materials and what the pitfalls are there, and in the process of that to discuss why such materials, digital materials, audio materials, etc., don't normally receive an imprimatur. Even so, that is going to be hard to try to educate folks in the parish, because again, they're coming out of a background in which everything that they have used in the past has been a print product, and so it's always just been kind of a box to check. Oh yeah, it's got an imprimatur. Okay, we can use it.
Sure.
Yeah. So that's probably not a very satisfactory answer, but you have given me a good idea for something we can do, and I will talk this over with our team here, and if we produce something along those lines, I will let John Henry know, and we'll get that out to everyone.
That'd be great. Thank you. Okay, so this is probably maybe the same answer, unfortunately, but through the course of this challenge, we have been creating sort of like a big training experience for the whole family at home to really train parents in their own house with their own kids how to be the primary educators of their children's faith. It's a 6-week in-home experience, and because it's our thing, it's audio based. And so with this, we're going to beta test it. We were thinking that after the beta test, when things were finalized, we would put it through the imprimatur process by maybe developing transcripts through our audio and submitting it that way. Is that possible, or is that not even a possibility?
You should simply check with your local diocese. I believe that there are dioceses that would consider that. There are others that are just simply going to say, look, since it's not going to be published in a printed form, even though you have the transcripts, we're not going to look this over. So it's really going to depend on your diocese.
Okay, I wish it was simple, but I appreciate your answers. Thank you.
Well, nothing simple when it comes to questions where ultimately it goes back to the diocese and to the local bishop, because you do have different standards in every diocese. There are broad things where we can say, okay, every diocese has to operate within the standards of canon law on this, but since canon law only requires this for printed materials, that means that a diocese can go beyond that if they wish.
Sure.
So they can't go beyond it in the sense of absolutely requiring that digital materials be vetted in that way. But they can go beyond it and say we would be happy to help you by providing this. Yeah.
Great. Helpful. Thank you.
Yep.
All right. Anybody else have questions? Just feel free to jump in. Scott, I don't hear any. So
yeah.
that.
No, I've got a question for the group as a whole. How many of you are actually dealing with printed materials as a whole or a part of what you're doing?
I see head nods and I see a hand raise. Jose said, nah. Hannah said, me.
Yep. Yeah. So only. Oh, okay. So I see a few here. Yeah, lots of printed too. I mean, in that sense, I would encourage just with printed materials, and especially anything that does even if it only seems like it's only tangential to questions of doctrine, dogma. I would encourage you to go ahead and contact your diocese and simply sit down, talk with them, even if it's virtual through email, and just explore the possibilities, because I do think that there is a value in going through the process, and also in understanding what your diocese does expect. And one of the great things about going through the Nihil Obstat process, and the Imprimatur process, is often, even a big publishing house like OSV, we get feedback from the diocese on this. Not just, hey, let's change this here or clean up that language slightly there, but even suggestions for, hey, it would be great. You can't do it in this book, but it would be great to do something along these lines for another book, or maybe this isn't a book, but this could be an article for one of your periodicals. So there are actually advantages to you as apostolates, as Catholic companies, in building up that kind of relationship and getting ideas that can help you move forward. Getting new voices, voices that are coming from your diocese to help you create new ideas.
All right, I see, Anna, it looks like you are up next. If you can go off mute, I'll just let you describe a little of what you're doing and your questions.
Sure. Yeah. So I am with Eden Invitation, which is a outreach to young adult Catholics experiencing same-sex attraction, gender discordance. We've looked at a variety of different options for resources like downloadable PDFs, and we're hoping to move forward with a couple print things within the next year.
Right.
One of the things I've heard from some organizations is imprimaturs and nihil, they take forever. And so that's why some places don't do it. I think for us, considering our area, it's pretty essential to have. But what, in your experience, is the range of time? I realize this is going to vary by diocese and how many changes you need to make, but do you have a general sense of the range of time it might take for approval?
So this goes back to what I was saying in my last remarks there. Build up a relationship with your censor librorum, or with whoever the competent authority is in your diocese, because that will be helpful as well. So OSV has such a relationship, has a long-standing relationship. Our censor librorum for the Diocese of Fort Wayne South Bend is at Mount St. Mary's, and he for us will turn things around very quickly. and so we can send a manuscript in, and if it's a short manuscript, say 140-page book, 144-page book, we may have the answer in a couple of days, and then we'll have the imprimatur back from the diocese probably a week after that. I have heard horror stories about it can take forever in other dioceses, but the reality is that if you have that relationship, it's more likely that you are going to get a quicker response.
Can I ask a follow-up?
Sure.
Um, so we're a dispersed organization. So we have employees in 3 states actually. So obviously we have a state we're incorporated in, but if we have some good relationships, perhaps where some of those other employees are as well, that maybe are better or at least more expedient in some of these areas, perhaps, is it unheard of?
Get that, Bishop Rhodes.
I mean, I wasn't going to just say it, but is it unheard of to receive that maybe from a different bishop, especially if you had relevant credentials?
Right. So this gets a little touchy. You can't really shop. Well, you can, but you really shouldn't shop for an imprimatur because in fact, in most cases, those who have shopped for them in the past, it's been for probably not the right reasons. I understand what you're saying there, and the reality is that we do at OSV occasionally publish books with an imprimatur from a different bishop. In those cases, it's usually been because the author of the book has an established relationship with his own bishop, and without even consulting us, submitted the manuscript to the bishop, got the imprimatur, and well, at that point, an imprimatur from one bishop is just as good as an imprimatur from another bishop. We would not go and seek one from a bishop outside of Fort Wayne South Bend, because this is where our operations are. But if an author has done that, that's fine. So in your case, where you're talking about having multiple people in multiple dioceses, that's certainly a possibility. Now, if you have someone, say, in the Diocese of Fort Wayne South Bend, and but your main offices are elsewhere, you wouldn't necessarily want to send something from someone who isn't resident in Fort Wayne South Bend to Fort Wayne South Bend. Yeah.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. Yep.
Edward, I saw you up next.
So I guess my question is, and this is someone who does work in an archdiocese. So I guess my question is, do you think that imprimaturs are that necessary outside of trying to sell to dioceses or trying to sell to parishes? I mean, the individual consumer, do they really care? And in some ways, isn't it more worthwhile these days to just get a couple of bishops on your advisory board or something like that, unless you're specifically trying to sell a catechetical text to an archdiocese or to a parish? That would be my question.
So if we're looking at a print product, and it does touch on doctrinal or dogmatic questions, even if it is aimed just at lay people, I would strongly encourage getting an imprimatur. Why? Well, you're right that most people who are purchasing such books probably don't even think about such matters. If you're going up on Amazon and you're purchasing a Catholic book, unless it has the see inside bit, it's probably not going to be in the marketing material that, say, Bishop Rhodes has provided an imprimatur to it. We don't put that in our marketing material, but there are people who do care, and especially when it comes to the more contentious doctrinal or moral theology issues, like Anna was mentioning. It is important, and it's I've used this analogy before, that it's the good housekeeping seal of approval, but actually it's more like the underwriter's laboratory seal of approval. It's been tested, and there's nothing in here that's going to hurt you. So yeah, you can make the argument either way. The good thing is, even if it's a trade book, for instance, Steve Weidenkopf's book that I mentioned earlier, we weren't actually thinking about that as a book that would see wide adoption in the classroom. It was really designed for lay people, just our standard trade book thing. So we actually, at first, we didn't seek an imprimatur. It wasn't just didn't seem necessary for us to do that. But then we found out afterwards, oh, there's a real need for this in schools, because there is no single one-volume solid orthodox history of Catholicism that isn't 30, 40, or 100 years old. And so we had a lot of high schools approaching us and saying, we want to use this book, but you don't have an imprimatur. So we submitted it retroactively for that, and in subsequent printings we've put that in there. So again, there's really not there's no downside to submitting something for an imprimatur. It's not like anybody's going to not buy it because of that. And so if you have the opportunity, if your diocese is, especially if your diocese has a reasonable turnaround time, why not?
All right, anybody else, feel free to just jump in. All right, Scott, I think that's what we got for today. Thank you so much for your time. I'm getting chats on how helpful this is. So I think this is one of the really valuable sessions, and we appreciate it.
You're welcome. And if you do have further questions, you start thinking about this later and something comes to mind, feel free to email me. My email is srichert, Richert, @osv.com. So feel free to reach out, and I'll be happy to try to address those questions.
Excellent. And if people want to stay on for another minute, I'll give you just a verbal overview of what I can give some details about the pitch. I just got a question about it, and I bet other people have the same question. So we can use the last 15 minutes to just do some pitch conversation. We're also going to schedule another session with it. So Scott, I bet you wouldn't find this interesting, or you might find it interesting, but I bet you don't have time. So feel free to stay on if you want, but otherwise we'll happily excuse you.
Okay, thanks.
All right.